ladies and gentlemen, really happy interview is in front of us because one of the guests is a mentor of Social and Media Matters. She has been guiding us from even before we became an organization, and all of us learn a lot from her, follow her, and her work has looked into various aspects of online space safety. She's also been to India many times. Hope to welcome her again very soon. But most importantly, what we're going to be talking about today with Anne Collier is AI and child safety. Yes, the latest buzzword around policy spaces. I think 31st of January, the committee hearing in the Senate has really brought it to the headlines again. So, Anne, welcome again. Thank you for making time for us, and it's always so exciting to have you.
Thank you, Ami. It's great to be with you.
So, 31st of January, I think, the Senate hearing was probably almost like a wake-up call to many people outside the trust and safety space. And like it happens, the news travels and turns into Chinese whisper. So a lot of commotion, a lot of excitement, a lot of information and misinformation in and around AI and child safety. So I would like to just get started on your general thought towards what's happening post or 31st of January or in Feb, and then we'll get into the questions.
Well, certainly. A lot is happening right now, as you well know, Ami. That Senate hearing was really about social media, and it was about child sexual exploitation material in particular, kind of illegal harms online. It definitely veered off topic quite a lot. There was a lot of, I feel, unfortunate sort of public humiliation going on there, but it was true to form. These hearings on both sides of the Atlantic really have are nothing new. And I am actually not sure how much they accomplish, because I don't feel it's helpful to think in terms of binaries, good guys, bad guys, industry versus government, online versus offline, for that matter, that this is really about children's lives and technology, and a whole lot of nuance and a whole lot of individuality, as the research shows us. So I wouldn't take that as much of a mile marker. It was kind of business as usual. And it's better to talk about the potential impacts of technology and on children and how they're using it. It's really helpful to talk with them.
Totally. Could not agree more. I've been in this space for 10 years, so headlines like these or information like this is a regular affair every week somewhere across the globe. Something similar has been happening, and we are in the same boat. That's the approach we need to have. So, shifting gears really quickly to artificial intelligence and children. Um, Artificial intelligence, I think, since ChatGPT became open to common users, one really saw the potential of it. Even in India, it has already started reaching into spaces like schools, homes, for many creative purposes, for educational purposes, and with it come the harms as well. So, when it comes to artificial intelligence and children, um, how do you approach it? Because I'm sure many of the big tech must be asking you as well. How should they be upgrading their trust and safety guidelines? OpenAI has come up with some frameworks. Harvard just recently came up with their own framework. So where
Yeah.
where do you stand with it?
Well, I think it's important to start with the fact that, first of all, AI itself is not new. It's been with us actually since the 1950s, and it has evolved a great deal. And what's new here, what it has been, sort of top of mind for at least a year, is generative AI, right? Which is a subset of machine learning AI, which is a subset of artificial intelligence in general. So what's new is AI that creates content, multimodal, all forms of content, whether it's speech, video, audio, text, also software code, right? It can generate all kinds of things. And that is a little unnerving for a lot of people. That's concerning, right? But it's not all negative. It's doing amazing things. I think since with the advent of generative AI, there has been a new strain of antibiotics discovered. And people are able to do less email. They can have generative AI compose emails. They can have them compose all sorts of things, and both good and bad. So I think it's really important to know that our brains have a negativity bias. And so when we hear about the downsides, they kind of stand out to us and trigger that fight, flight, freeze part of our brains. And so that's a very important thing to acknowledge before, we sort of get into the nitty gritty. And the other thing that I think we all need to be very clear on is that things are changing very fast. And that too is concerning to a lot of people. Just last week, there was an AI elections accord with all the tech companies in Munich at a cybersecurity conference. There were dignitaries from the EU, the Prime Minister of Greece, along with all the tech executives. And it was, largely ceremonial because a lot of the tech companies are doing what people are concerned about, but that doesn't mean that they're in complete control of what's happening with all the elections around this sort of election super year in the world here. And, it was national news over here last week that there is now an undergraduate degree in AI engineering at University of Pennsylvania. And a pioneer scholar at that university, Ethan Mollick, who I recommend everybody follow, just wrote that there have been 2 big leaps in generative AI just in the past week in terms of capacity and speed. Since Google came out with Gemini, its latest iteration, which truly now competes with ChatGPT 4 and probably 4.5. There's also a Gemini 1.5. It's like crazy to try to keep up with all of this, right? So things are moving very fast. And the thing that is super annoying, I think, to many of us is we're truly back in move fast and break things mode. Have you heard that phrase? I'm sure you have, Ami, but I'm not sure if all of your audience has, but it is truly the Silicon Valley investment startup community, mode of, sort of getting things moving fast in a new era. So people are now calling this the AI age. We've moved past the digital age, and there's no way these technologists can think through all of the unintended consequences of what they're developing, right? I think some of them are working hard, but not all as responsibly as some. So that's sort of a preface to what we're talking about here. Tell me what you'd like to talk about from there.
I think you kind of led to my next question, which was, how can developers incorporate child safety into design? Safety by design is not a new term anymore. It has been pushed. We have tried to get it into education systems with tech. Legislators are talking about it. Communities are talking about it. So, as you said, move fast and break things, and that's great for innovation, and probably innovation happens like that. But be it the safety belt in cars, or be it spell check on Word, or be it parental controls on social media, I think we have learned enough, and the memory is very recent, where it is very, very important to almost have safety as a pillar of innovation, because otherwise the harm is too large. there is real world harm, there is real world hurt, and the numbers are big, and the business of negativity regarding children is also a big business and industry. So how can developers incorporate child safety into this new technology, I think would be my question.
Well, they talk about guardrails and building these models, these large language models that do the work of generative AI, into having the models have safeguards built in. But software engineers can't think of everything, and we all worry on all over the world about algorithmic bias, right? We worry about large language models being fed massive amounts of data that reflect all the good, bad, and neutral stuff on the internet, going into training these models, right? I read the recipe that went into ChatGPT 3, and it was something like 3% of its training data was all of Wikipedia, and something like 60% was 10 years worth of websites from 2010 to 2020, I believe. And then everything that was on Reddit that had 3 upvotes, it's like there's just like this total vast range of stuff that's going into these models that is overwhelming. And the developers themselves, they're black boxes, right? The developers themselves aren't completely sure how they operate once they're fed all this data. So it's almost as if all the safeguards that they create aren't enough. They can't anticipate what these models can do, and they're getting more and more sophisticated all the time. So now that we're back in move fast and break things, the onus is on us, the users, too much to keep one another safe. I can give you one example of really responsible work on the part of developers. Anthropic is, one of the sort of grandfather generative AI companies, developers. It spun off from OpenAI because they wanted to create a model that was as safe as possible. And they didn't see that happening at OpenAI. So they created Claude, but they created another large language model in addition to Claude that was created as a check on what Claude did. So what Anthropic did that's so fascinating is they created what is called constitutional AI, which is it's not based on any particular constitution, but it's basically a set of rules that the model is supposed to abide by. So it's kind of a foundational set of guardrails, right? And Anthropic created 2 simultaneous large language models, one to check the other. So Claude is probably one of the safer ones that we can use. But the problem is, there are all these open source large language models that have been released out into the wild. And people can now, put some of these models on their laptops, so anything can develop from there. We have to be very, very watchful and careful.
Yeah, I think I mean what Anthropic has done is probably a great example of how things can proceed, and that kind of brings me towards frameworks and regulatory frameworks. So there's a lot of talk in India. We ourselves are regularly in conversation with the ministry because India is also coming up with some interesting legislation, just to put it diplomatically. So when it comes to key elements, what should these frameworks um, include? And you said earlier, which was really interesting, is now AI can code. So and GitHub is a good example because GitHub has 99% code written by AI, and that has just changed in the last 1 year. So maybe
Mhm.
now tech startups and AI companies need more of the policy and the social workers because the coding can be done by AI. But what can this regulatory framework, or what should it include? How can they go about uh, trying to control something which actually nobody knows how does it really work? When we get into the nuances of large language models, their neural networks, their predictability, the precision increases and decreases, but it's still a quite a big game of guesstimation. I mean, people get it right most of the time, but nobody really knows. So at one end, we have a technology which is kind of working uh, uh, by itself sometimes, and on the other side, we want to guardrail it. So how should we approach these frameworks, these regulatory frameworks? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a whole combination of things. For one thing, it takes many skill sets. So obviously, we can't just rely on software engineers to build safe models always. So we need their expertise in training and red teaming, testing, all the aspects of releasing a large language model. We need that expertise in the discussion, but we also need government in the discussion. We need people in government who understand the technology and can check their understanding against the technology people in the conversation. And then we need advocates. We need people who are advocating for vulnerable populations, and we need research. So some people are calling this a policy sandbox, a place where a lot of different perspectives and skill sets and forms of expertise can have an ongoing conversation. Um, and then in working with industry, I think policymakers need to screen for conflicts of interest, right? Industry is needed in the mix, but all parties need to be attuned to potential conflicts, like industry getting government contracts as a result of its work with government. I'd say a vital need is the need for standardization of definitions, and in assessing AI risk. Everybody on the same page. Awareness, this is key all over the world, awareness of the need for contextual relevance, right? A lot of these models have been developed in Silicon Valley, in one state out of 50 in the United States. There's some amazing models coming. I just heard about Mistral in France. So there are amazing large language models being developed in other parts of the world. And so there's hope there that there will be that understanding of context, cultural context, right? I don't think large language models developed in California are going to be completely relevant in Nigeria or in Indonesia. So that's key. And then avoiding falling into, and this happens a lot in policymaking circles, what is called techno-solutionism. Like, technology is the solution to problems with technology. And it's not. It's a misconception because of all that happens out in life that are factors in how people experience the technology or use the technology. So there are a lot of elements there, but these things are beginning to emerge in places like Tech Policy Press, which I highly recommend as a source for you and your viewers.
Definitely, I think the last part is a really important part, that more technology is probably not the solution for technology, and there are other stakeholders and other parts of our life which is very important. And I think one of the major spaces where there is a lot of conversation also in India but across the globe is education and development of children. So uh, the reason why AI becomes important is because there is a lot of hope that it can play a positive role. On the other side, there are critics who say that there is a potential of negative effects on a child's cognitive or social skills. And how do you see it playing a role specifically in children's education and development? I think it's one of the most important part of the future in a way. That how do the children, how can they use this technology for positive growth?
Well, there's so many pieces to that issue, right? This is where it gets really human. We're really getting down to the human level. And if we're completely practical and candid, GAI is still in its early days, and though it's becoming more social with people, Meta having released chatbots into, I think, Instagram that you can choose to bring into a social group you're having a conversation with. But I'm hearing they're pretty cringy, that young people are not really into these chatbots. But then we also have peer-reviewed research that says that chatbots can be really useful in mental health care as a kind of sort of interim solution, or when there's huge backup in the need for human professional care, right? So generative AI is becoming more interactive and social, but right now it's mostly about media. So what we need to work with our children on are media literacy skills, right? This is a literacy that has an evidence base going back decades. There's solid research behind teaching media literacy, including critical thinking, and also some skills like what our friends at the University of New Hampshire called refusal skills, right? Helping children to recognize what upsets them, to notice, be aware of how they feel when they encounter certain media, whether it's, violent content or manipulative content, whatever it is. If they feel something in their gut, have them come to you, have them walk away or turn it off and come to an adult they trust who has a little more life experience and can help talk them down or talk them through how they feel. So, this is nothing new. This is about parenting and caring for children. Media literacy needs to be scaffolded. Actually, this sounds like a plug, but I really believe in it. I've been working with Google. It's Be Internet Awesome curriculum for elementary grades, 6 media literacy lessons that helps children realize that there's more to what they see than what's in the frame. It helps them question what they see and to develop the critical thinking skills that they need to really protect themselves. Media literacy is protective. And so this needs to be taught in school. It's not taught in school enough here in the United States, and I doubt it's taught enough in many other countries. I think Finland does a really great job in teaching media literacy in pre-secondary school. So I think those are important skills for children to learn, and they're both about media literacy and social emotional learning, understanding what they're feeling internally. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, totally. And it just reminded me of 2016 or 17 when we together saw that the I'm forgetting the name. I think it's called Quest from Meta,
Yeah,
which you can put.
yeah,
And my first thought, of course, I love the basketball game, but my first thought was this is amazing for all the people training to be doctors, right? For surgery.
yeah.
Now,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
Gen AI in science, because to imagine the universe is a little complex, but to actually have it around you, you can understand it. So I see a
Absolutely.
lot of amazing implications of it, and over a period of time, it will also become affordable, especially in the global south, be it South America, Africa, India. And when it comes to AI chatbots, actually, we at Social and Media Matters are developing one for victims, because a lot of the times people are not comfortable sharing details with another human because of the Indian
Right.
cultural context. So a part of it can actually be done with a bot because they know that I can tell everything, and nobody's judging me. So plus for counselors training, so the positive implications are so many, and I think literacy is the common important aspect, which is for everything new in the world. And while you were talking, it just reminded me of our friend Mr. Stephen Balkan, who said digital parenting is parenting. So it comes down to the
Yes.
same love, spending time, and listening to your child. So, bro, it's really helpful. Looking at the immediate or the long-term future of AI, where do you see this growing? And you have seen multiple technological revolutions, social media being the last one, but you've been in this space even before Facebook and YouTube and TikTok were the thing. So, where do you see AI and children and the future of this movement, this AI generation, as you were saying? Where do you see it going?
Well, right now, I think for young people, generative AI is kind of a toy. It's something to sort of play with, mess with, maybe write an essay for school if their teacher's not on top of things. I think generative AI this is much, much bigger than social media ever was. This is huge. And it's going to affect every aspect of our lives. And, we've already talked about healthcare, mental health care. There's, Professor Malik, who I mentioned before, is teaching as he teaches his business school students, his graduate students in their Masters of Business Administration programs. He's having them create use cases for generative AI models. And I might even have a list of some examples that his students came up with. One built a GPT to automate the process of creating social media posts, from company thought leadership reports, right, from the management of their company. Another created a tool that allows search funds to more easily reach out to potential partners, right? Another one, a GPT that helps real estate investors analyze rent rolls and do deals and write memorandums. Another, potential acquisitions, sort of managing an acquisition, helping government officials understand economic development reports. It's just endless how many use cases there will be. We know that ad agencies now use Gen AI to brainstorm creative campaigns for their clients. They don't do all the work, but they just get, the juices going, right? So it can be creative work, it can be scientific work, it can be artistic work, you name it. And we're all very concerned about the copyright effects and the effects on artists and musicians and writers and so on. I think we've got to teach it in school though, right? Because it's here to stay, and children need to know how to use it well, effectively, and ethically, right? So ethics definitely comes into this. One of the things that Professor Malik used before his university had a code of ethics around generative AI was to insist that his students use it and insist on full disclosure on their use of it, and then hold them accountable for any inaccuracies. So, we know that generative AI models make stuff up, and different models have different percentages of how much they hallucinate or make things up. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to teach our children that. And we all are going to need to develop, if we want any credibility whatsoever, we have to develop that sense of accountability around our use of it. So all of this needs to play out in school. And I think it will change school. And I know a lot of teachers are very uneasy about that, but they can sort of flip things around. Instead of assigning an essay that a child would maybe have a GPT model write, they can have students get an essay generated and then critique it in class. They can apply their critical skills to determine factuality and creativity and all the things that go into writing as they learn it in school. So there are ways to do this, but we're going to have to get a little bit creative. And I think we're going to have to learn ethics. And I think we're going to have really smart government to regulate it properly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A tall order.
uh, a change in the education system, already a big one.
Yeah, that's
Uh, Barring the Scandinavians, I don't know who's achieved it. I've been working with the Indian ministry, which creates curriculum for the last 15 years. So yeah, I'll just leave it there and not go into it. Smart government. It's a year of election, folks. So please listen to Anne. We need really smart people who understand AI. Okay, okay, a lot happening there. I think as a closure, I would like to come back to a little closer to home, something which you actually can impact a lot, at least for a few of the younger ones in trust and safety. Is what should folks like us who work in trust and safety, because AI has come in and it is, like you said, it's a far bigger change than social media. It is very, very different uh, in, in the systemic sense, right? It just works very differently. And what should we be doing? Because we are being asked for advice, and many of us are giving it because that is the that's what the profession calls for. I Most of the time I think, okay, I have absolutely no clue how can this be done. So what should trust and safety folks be doing? Because it is an important role to play, especially when it comes to AI algorithms.
Well, are we talking about content moderators or are we talking about online safety advocates of users? There are
I
all
think
these different parts to the
I think the
ecosystem, right?
second one, I think content moderators still have their job cut out well,
Yes,
and
they
there
do.
will be
Yeah.
AI solutions which will help them a lot. But I think it's more about the online safety advocates, because, like, right in the beginning, you said, 31st of Jan wasn't such a big milestone, but the way it erupted in India, I think so many more reporters, at least the people reporting on online safety has increased by 1,000% just after that one Senate hearing, or just because of the way it was done. Um, there are people talking about making movies about it in India. So that's the impact it had outside the United States in a way. Now, the responsibility part comes to people who have been in the space or will be entering the space. There are new people who will be joining trust and safety and will be advocates of online safety, child safety. What can they do to impact the space positively, constructively, rather than just creating panic? Because that is very easy to do. There are great statements that we can replay again and again to create panic. But how do we use this technology as a solution and advocate for that? So, advice for folks like us.
Well, I think become familiar with the technology itself, play with it, make images with Dolly, make emails with GPT-4 or Gemini, use the search engines, Bing and Gemini, Google, and compare them. Just kind of get familiar with how it works. It can actually be kind of fun. And then I think we really need to talk to the people who we represent or serve, our constituents. So for me, it's young people. What so many people of my generation forget is that they have absolutely vital expertise that we need. It's their lived experience with technology. And it can't be left out of the mix, or all policymaking will be completely irrelevant to them. I remember some Ofcom figures, and if I have them right, if I remember them correctly, 70% of 13 to 17-year-olds in the UK have used generative AI. 70%. I doubt that figure is as high among adults. 40% of kids 9 to 12. 40%. So, and their favorite one is Snapchats. right? So they're messing around with it in a very social context, right? We need to understand how they use it, what they like about it, how it's relevant to them, what they hate about it, and so that we can develop policy. This would go for people who work in women's rights. This would go for people who work in disability rights, all of the different kinds of marginalized populations or protected classes in our societies we need to work with to understand what it means to them. And then we can do smart model testing and smart policy making.
All right, folks, I think you've heard it. Spend time with the technology and in the field. I think I totally echo that. Uh, the agency and the rights of children. If there is something that we can push in 2024 is to listen to them. Uh, and they have a lot of interesting things to say. I mean, like you spoke about Snapchat.
Yeah.
I just about 3 weeks ago, I learned the new term Snap Streak in one of our workshops, and
Mhm.
it was a wonderful learning experience for me as a trainer as well. Yeah, I think it was a similar conversation in that event in the United States where, how children are very positive about AI. They want to remove the negativity. They have very clear say about what are the different roles of different stakeholders. So I think listening to our constituents is pretty much what should be the tagline for 2024, considering there are 70 elections across the globe. So
Right. Yeah.
this is super interesting.
I
And all
mean, I think about University of California, Berkeley professor Alison Gopnik, who said, children are the R&D department of the human race, right? So I think we need to listen to our R&D department. That's probably sort of baseline policy.
oh,
I know you know
definitely.
that.
No, I know. I mean, that's probably with all the guidance I got from you and Laura. That's why we focus only on school and colleges. We stay there. Also because it's the most positive and inspiring space. And it, and in India, that's where I've spent most of my time in workshops. Their eyes light up when they see something new, and that's the most inspiring part. Every little thing is so exciting.
Yeah.
uh, and I think the more experience you have, you tend to go been there, done that. But for them, it's the first time in their life they're ever going to play with a DALI, and what they're going to create is just going to be something so different. No, that's yeah, so inspiring and so much food for thought. I think I'm pretty sure many folks who will look into this interview would like to talk to you even more, especially the policy folks in India. We haven't had you here for a while, but I think it's time to get you back. COVID is gone, life is safe, and would love to talk with you in some conference here and with some of the big tech folks here.
It's always a pleasure talking with you, Ami.